Good evening, Sandites. Welcome to, I believe this is week 5, maybe, of District Dialogue. No one's nodding at me, so I'm pretty sure.
It's 5.
So it is week 5 of District Dialogue. So we're going to get started straight up at 7 o'clock. Tonight's topic is special education delivery of services as we begin the new year. I do want to give you guys a few updates. Specifically, we're going to start with the website, because I did receive a call this week from a patron who was struggling with finding something on our website, because we have a pop-up page that we instituted in the spring that brought to the attention of our public the ever-changing COVID-19 updates from March through May. So Sean Beard is sitting in the background. He's kind of running the show tonight. If you can pull up the website, Sean, I would like to flash this on the screen and make sure everybody can see what I'm talking about. When you pull up the website, it's www.sandites.org. When you first click on that page, what you see is a big window, and I think it's showing you right now, that has Welcome to Sand Springs Public Schools, and then what you saw in the spring regarding things that we wanted to bring to the patrons' attention very quickly as we were, going through the ever-changing world from March to May. One of the things that is posted here, and I want to bring it to your attention, is the draft re-entry plan that we talked about last week, and it's the bottom link. And so I want to make sure that everyone's aware of where that's at. Remember that it is in draft format, but wanted to bring it to your attention in case you were struggling finding that document. I'll talk more about that, but if you notice, this pop-up window has a little X in the upper right-hand corner. Yep. And if you click on that, then you get to the homepage of our website. And so we talked about navigation of the website about 5 weeks ago, but there's all kinds of information, including site-specific information. I'm going to introduce my team in just a minute, but you've seen all of these people before in the last 4 or 5 weeks of dialogue. But specifically, Mr. Roeder is here from our Virtual Academy. He's our director. And Sean, you might take him, you got out of it, but take him to the link for the Virtual Academy and let the public see where that is at. So under sites, you scroll down to the bottom and you see Sand Springs Virtual Academy linked there. So anyway, want to make sure everybody was very clear on how to find information or how to get to the homepage of the website, because that was a little bit confusing. In regard to our reentry plan that we just showed you how to access, please know that we mentioned that the language in terms of cloth face coverings was going to be revisited. We actually have a committee meeting scheduled for this Friday. Our full committee with our parents and teachers and school board members that are going to be in place to talk about some reworked language in regarding the wearing of masks by both students and staff. So I don't have answers yet. I think it's safe to assume that this document is still fluid. We actually made some changes today regarding when employees can come back to work based on new CDC guidance that was posted, I believe, July 16th. So that it continues to ebb and flow, there is no doubt. And so as it does that, we are keeping track of all the guidance that we can get our hands on from, of course, the CDC, and then our Tulsa Health Department, our state health department as well. So it's been a busy week already. It's just Tuesday, so I'm going to introduce my team. Ms. Arnold, our assistant superintendent for human resources and student services, is here, along with Carrie Slageber, who's our district director of special education. And then Sean is really the guru in the background that you can't see that's running the show. And of course, Sean Beard is our executive director of teaching and learning in the district. So welcome, everyone. We're going to talk about a few things. Of course, the biggest content, Carrie, is special education, and we're going to get to that. But I do want to briefly talk about how intertwined special education services really are to the entire district. I don't think you can singularly talk about special education without knowing really a large array of service delivery that we offer. And in the context that we're in now, we also, I know we're getting some questions of how special education works with our virtual academy students. So we have a lot of kind of intermingled pieces that work together in, I think, a really awesome way. So just an update, Mr. Roder, I want to hear total enrollment for virtual academy to date right now to start the new school year at.
As of right now, this afternoon, we have 157 enrollments, pre-K through 12, 63 pre-K through 5, 94 grades 6 through 12.
Wow. And so the biggest change that you're seeing, obviously, this year from maybe where we were last year with the makeup of enrollment students would be what?
Elementary has grown. We've gone from the 11 we finished the year with last year up to 63. We're taking the lessons we learned last year and we're going to just bring those out and go wide scale across the board. And we learned some valuable lessons last year, what worked, what didn't, and we've taken that and designed a program that I think we're all going to be proud of, and I think the kids will enjoy.
Perfect. So again, that is different. Big expectation for, of course, our program, because we're really excited about doing things differently, honestly, and meeting the needs of our students and our parents in an ever-changing time. And then the idea of learning just a little bit from it to make ourselves better educators and better teachers. So Jay's done a lot of work, of course, that was initiated several years ago. We began that program in 2011. So Jay's certainly carrying a big torch and doing an amazing job. His contact information, I believe, is in the banner at the bottom. So j.rodert@sandites.org, 246-1483. So great work with Mr. Rodert for sure. So let's talk a little bit about enrollment. I know I mentioned last week that we were going to have a time change for the start of the elementary day, Ms. Arnold.
Right.
And so if you don't mind going over when our K-5, so our 5 elementary schools will start, that would be great.
So we did have that conversation last week, and our elementary schools are going to move about 10 minutes, and I know that it's hard to get them up in the morning, but elementary times, the start time for the instructional day will begin at 7:40 for our kindergartners through 5th grade. So it's 7:40 to 2:30, and that's Monday through Thursday. And then Friday, we still have that early release, so it would be 7:40 until 2 o'clock on Fridays.
Perfect. And they should be getting information
From their
really
site, yes, yes.
from site principals. And I know Enrollment is pushing out some information currently. The big, I guess, message I think we pushed out potentially is a supply list. I may be unclear about that, Ms. Arnold. I know we added a couple of things, and now my code is, so what's on the supply list? And the biggest
So it's not saying that we're having all kids wear them, but just for their safety and health concerns, we did add, I was talking to Ms. Larkin at Enrollment who does that for us, and we're putting on that we need for parents to put a mask on the supply list. Immediately got an email back from Ms. Larkin. Do you mean throwaway mask, washable mask, clear mask? What kind of mask? Because parents are going to ask me. And so we are just requiring like a washable mask, maybe some that you could, if you are concerned, that you could put a filter in. They're not required by all students. We're still working on that reentry plan, what that looks like. But just to keep your child safe and others safe, so we're requesting that they have a mask. We know some families might not be able to afford that mask, and so we will have some that will be supplied. We'll have some that will also be donated that schools will end up having. And so we just added it just as a safety barrier for our students. And while we're talking about special needs, we have a lot of kids that are fragile, like medically and those types of things, and in those classrooms. And we understand that not everybody's going to be able to wear them, so nobody panic. That's kind of on an individual basis what that looks like for our special education students. But we just our goal is just to keep everybody healthy. And Absolutely. So we went ahead and listed that on there. And
right.
And it's strongly recommended right now.
Right, and so, we're gonna get to Carrie.
You're
But
great.
You know
You
how
are
I
great.
am. I just, I really I asked for a list today, not a list, but a number of employees we had. And so this is right up your alley. When you talk about the safety of students and staff, obviously, to conduct school, we have to have a healthy workforce. And I think in any business or industry, the ability to be productive and do the work that you're designed to do by whatever industry you're in. Our field happens to be educating children, which we think is very critical. It's important to keep the health of our workforce top notch. And so how many employees do we have, including substitutes?
We have 760 plus. So there's still a few in there that we're hiring, and that's why I say the plus, because we still have some posted on our website. So 760 plus employees that are in Sand Springs working every day. And that includes our lay coaches, part-time people, that's everybody. But that is a huge number that, we want to keep our staff all safe, but we can keep our students safe and the community out and about.
Sure.
So-
I knew it was around 700, and when you capitalize on the number of substitutes and part-time bus drivers and those kind of employees, it's a large number.
It's enormous.
Just an interesting piece of data today. Okay, so let's just kind of get into special education, Carrie. This is where my heart is. It's one of my favorite areas, and I have a little bit of background, as you know, in that. But I have to tell you, before we get into how that relates to distance learning or to virtual academy or really any other area that we'd want to get into, I think it's important that people know really the kind of services that Sand Springs Public School offers, and historically what they've always offered. And we've always been very proud of our array of choices for service delivery for our students based on individual needs. I think that's an important part to say. So let's just talk about, Carrie, if you don't mind addressing, what are some of the service delivery models that we would offer students with special needs?
Carrie, can I ask you one thing? Because I'm just thinking about this. I just got an email, I guess it was last week, that a parent said, my child's not on an IEP, which stands for Individualized Educational Plan, but they have some medical needs. What does that look like? So I always get asked this, and I know you did when you were in special ed. Jay, you probably do, teachers. What is the difference between an IEP and a 504 too? So somewhere in there, if you'll share that.
Sure. So there are three differences. So you can have a student that's on an IEP, a student who's on a 504, and then you could also, we have written individual health plans for students. So for example, a student has diabetes and they have some certain needs that they have during the school day. We're going to write a health plan for them because it's not affecting them academically or it's not affecting them educationally, but I need to go to the nurse's office at this time to get my blood sugar checked. And so that's going to be a health plan, and we're going to work that through with the family and the nurse at the school. The next step up would be a 504. So a student may need some accommodations in the classroom, but they don't need special education services like direct instruction from a special ed teacher or even related services from maybe the speech path or another therapy provider. Okay, so that's going to be the next step up. We often see students with a diagnosis of ADHD or anxiety, those kinds of diagnoses that we get from an outside provider could qualify a student for a 504. And then an IEP, that is going to be the most intensive services that a student needs. And so that's going to be a student who is going to need either classroom accommodations that are significant to be in a general ed grade level class, or a service delivery that's not just general education, but it's going to be a special education delivery. And so that's a huge gamut of what we provide. So it can go from the lowest level of needing extra help is what we would call a student who's on a monitoring IEP. And so we've noticed that there's a deficit somewhere. We've noticed that they, have an area of concern, but they're in general education classes. They might have a few accommodations, but really they're spending their day in a general ed classroom. So we're going to monitor them. If I'm the teacher of record there, I'm touching base with the general ed English teacher and saying, I noticed he has 5 zeros. What's going on here? What do we need to do to make sure that we're getting this student back on track? One of the things that we're really looking at right now is if a student has been on a monitor only IEP for a couple of years and they're doing really great in class, we're starting to have those conversations with parents like, maybe it's okay to dismiss them from services, and that scares parents sometimes. They get a sense of security by being on the IEP, but at the end of the day, if we don't need to serve a student on an IEP, then we're going to want to take them off of that, because if they're making great progress and doing great things academically in a general ed realm without our help, then we're going to let them fly. We're going to cut them loose from that. So that's monitoring. Then you can go to a next step where a student maybe needs what we would call some resource assistance. So at the elementary level, that's going to look like I'm in my regular ed class during their reading block, but then I'm also going to go to the special ed teacher and I'm going to get a little extra help in reading from the teacher. And the goal there is to get them closer and closer until they are on level with their peers. And then we have forms of direct instruction. So once a kid hits the middle school or the high school level, and they still have a pretty big gap between grade level expectations and where they're actually able to perform, that student is going to be in what we call a direct instruction class. And so the teacher is a special education teacher. So I'm an English teacher I'm English certified and I'm special ed certified. And so I've got that class. And the great thing is those classes are smaller in size. They're going to be more direct instruction that's individualized. And so they can really get to the IEP goals and working with those kids on their specific needs. And like I said, it's going to be a smaller class. And so they can really get to those kids and do a lot more one-on-one with them. So that's going to be what direct instruction looks like. And then we have something that could be even what we would say is a little more restrictive from that. And that's going to be that a student is in a self-contained program. And a self-contained program can look, it can be different depending on the kid. And so you could have a student who needs to spend all of their core classes, my math, English, science, social studies, with the special ed teacher. But then I can go out in the elementary level, I can go out to PE and art and music, and I can go to those things with a general ed class. As it gets to the high school level, okay, I'm in a direct instruction class all day long, except for maybe 1 or 2 times that I'm out. And then you have it where a student maybe the entire day they're in a self-contained program where they're going to be working in a classroom with a special educator and also paraprofessionals that are in the room. And those are going to be students that are working more on functional academic skills, life skills, and working on activities of living so that they're making sure that they're going to be able to do things independently on their own. And then within the course of all that, we also provide all sorts of related services. So if a student needs services from the speech teacher, if they need services from occupational therapy or physical therapy, we have a contract with someone who does visual services for us, orientation and mobility if a student needs to learn how to use a cane around the halls of the school. And so we really, I feel like we pride ourselves on meeting the needs of each individual child and what's best for that student. And I feel like our special ed department has always been a department that thinks outside the box. I don't think that's new to Sand Springs or me taking over as the director. I feel like that's a foundation that was laid out for us a long, long time ago. And in that course of being able to think outside the box, we do some pretty cool things with our kids. We have classes that go to therapeutic horseback riding, and We have a program at the high school where they have partnered with the Center for the Individuals with Physical Challenges, and that program comes into our high school and works with our students. And so to me, this challenge of what is it going to look like in the future with COVID, like I feel like we've already been thinking outside the box for so long in special ed that it's actually a pretty simple transition for us.
So another thing that popped in my head was the worksite learning program.
Mhm.
And at some point, hopefully we can get to this topic maybe later in the year, but we've been working really hard at an individual career academic plan for all of our students.
Mhm.
But what's funny is I was kind of capturing what that meant for the general population of students at Sand Springs Public Schools. It dawned on me that we've been really doing that with special education for several years, and we haven't worked by program. So you might be expanding on that just a tad.
Yeah, and so we have a program. Angela Fitzgerald is the teacher that is over that program at the high school. And what we do right now is with our 9th and 10th graders, they're in the first hour program, which is more of a work skills, where they're learning how you clock in and out, what you wear to a job interview, how you fill out a job application. And then also, we were very fortunate 2 years ago, we got a grant from the Sand Springs Education Foundation for a little mobile coffee shop that we named the Morning Grind, which I just think is great. And those students in that first hour class, they take orders and serve coffee and snacks and other drinks to faculty and staff around the high school. And so we had a donation. Kelly Smith at Farmers Insurance donated a cash register that is just like you would see if you walked into a store like Walmart or any kind of a actual retail store. And so they plug in the money, they have to make change. And so it's really preparing them for life after high school because everybody needs purpose. It doesn't matter if you have a disability or you don't have a disability, you need and you want purpose in your life. And so for them to see for maybe the first time that I can learn job skills and I can be employable and I can be productive to help my family in the future, that's huge. That's really huge. And so that's our first hour program. They do that program in 9th and 10th grade. And then when they're ready and they get those skills, they move on to our 6th and 7th hour program, which is actually a 2-hour block where they go off campus and they work in different businesses around Sand Springs.
Thank you for the community support.
Yes,
yes,
yeah, absolutely. And they, Reese's is a great supporter. Yellow House Market is great. They actually come over to this building and do some work for us here. And I will shamelessly plug that if you would love to help us, if you are a business owner in Sand Springs, we could send the best group of kids out to work with you, and we would be happy to partner with you too.
And they go with a job coach.
Yes.
I think it's important to say that we provide the support.
Yes.
So that we're not just sending the kids out, but we have a job coach, an adult that walks
absolutely
through skill sets with them. And so I love to hear your enthusiasm.
That sounds great. So I know what to think. How do I sign my kid up for that? How do I sign my child up for an IEP? How do I get that?
Yeah. Well, there is a process. We've actually we worked really hard this last year to really shore up that process for referral. And so I would say if your child, if you have some red flags or if you have some concerns, start with the counselor at your site. And the counselor can work with, we have school psychologists that are assigned to each one of our sites.
Employees.
And they are, yes, they are our Sand Springs Schools employees. And
what's the earliest that you would have a kid in special ed?
Well, you can start in the school system at 3. So, and we do at the Early Childhood Center. And very often that's the first time maybe that it's been recognized that the child might need some extra assistance. And so we start at 3, and that's for all services.
So it takes about a week to get my child.
I love it. I love it.
Because you know that's what parents are thinking. Oh, I'm going to sign up. I got about a week.
So the way that it works is that when the school psych is going to sit down with you and they're going to have a conversation with you about what your concerns are. They're going to talk to the classroom teacher. They're going to talk to other people in the school that are interacting with those students. Very often, if they're brand new to school, we're going to kind of want to watch and observe for a little bit and make sure it's not just, wow, I'm overwhelmed because this is the first time I've ever been in this kind of a structured setting. If they're older, if they're elementary age or middle school age, we're going to do some interventions. We've got a really strong intervention program here in Sand Springs. And so intervention really falls on our general ed teachers, as well as we have some interventionists, and then our special ed teachers can also step in and help once we get to what we would call tier 3 intervention. So I'm not going to get into all of those details tonight, but if we did intervention and we did not see your child making progress, that's when we would start the evaluation. We would open an evaluation and we would get parent consent for testing. And then from the day that the parent signs consent, that we have 45 school days to do that evaluation.
So about 6 weeks to 3 months, really.
It could be, yeah, depending on the school calendar.
You're gathering information.
Yes.
But I think it's important to know that during that time period, intervention is still applied.
Agreed, yes.
And so it's not like we're waiting
No.
and wondering. It's really about applying intervention
Yes,
to
absolutely.
make sure the student can make progress.
Right, because our ultimate goal is to not have to put them on an IEP.
Sure.
If we can see the intervention works, then we're going to be happy with that. We're going to be pleased with that outcome. But yes, absolutely, you would still be getting intervention services as we were evaluating for an IEP.
I love the fact that we are able to provide service providers directly in Sand Springs Public Schools. So like you said, we have 3 school psychologists that are actually on staff.
Yes.
How many speech pathologists?
We have 7 speech pathologists.
7, and some of them share. I feel like there's less speech and language services that are required at maybe Charles Page High School as the
Sure.
student gets older, but definitely all elementary schools have a speech pathologist assigned to their site, as does Clyde Boyd Middle School.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And then, of course, we have folks that provide occupational therapy and physical therapy, and then for the more sensory kinds of difficulties like hearing impairment or visual impairment, we do have contracted services
Right.
for those students.
Right.
So I could not have said that any better than what you just did, and I love hearing that.
Okay, one more devil's advocate. Just one
Of
more.
course, this
Yeah,
is
that's my
Kristen
job.
Arnold, yeah.
And so I know my kid, needs speech services, but we already have a speech therapist. We love her. You probably know her.
Probably.
This is the kind of conversation I have as a principal. And so can she just come to the site and provide those services there? Because I don't want them to miss school and take them after school, but can they just come to the site?
So because we provide our own services, we wouldn't have outside therapists come in. And so some of our students qualify for school-based therapies, and many of them get outside therapies as well. One thing that we really try to explain to parents is if you're getting outside services for occupational therapy or physical therapy or even speech, they don't have to make goals that are specifically school or academic related, whereas we want to make sure that if the physical therapist is working with a student, it's about how they're going to make educational gains. So maybe they're working with him on positioning, how he can sit in a certain type of chair so that he can remain in the classroom. The occupational therapist might be working on, we have a certain kind of a tilt board that we want to be able to let you ride on so that you have that support for your arm to ride. And so what outside or private therapy looks like versus school-based, we really have to make sure that school-based therapy is driven by making academic and educational gains.
Great explanation, for sure. Let's shift a little bit, Carrie, because I know that you've been getting questions because with the uptick in enrollment for Virtual Academy, we want to make sure that just because a parent would choose a virtual option this year, specifically in this pandemic that we're in, that we could provide ample service delivery for our special education student population. So I know that was a question when we started really visioning forward how Virtual Academy could look different, even pre-COVID. One of the things, Jay, I believe you brought to our attention is the need for staff that could help you in that setting. So I know we've talked about it before. We might have a different audience here tonight that might want to know the question, who would be considering our virtual academy. So could you kind of explain how that might work?
Yeah, so we have Casey Yateman. She's been at the high school teaching special education and English at Charles Page, and she's moving over to the virtual academy to be our on-site full-time special education teacher to help me design education plans for those students as they enroll. I worked with Ms. Schlehuber for the last 2 years when we were both at Charles Page High School designing these plans for students as they came in. So we've had a lot of experience anyway with doing that. And now we're bringing Casey in. So now we have that extra set of eyes on the kids. And she's there in the lab. She can meet with the kids any time of day that the lab is open, or through video conferencing, because that's been a big need from families that I've heard is, do they have to come to the lab to meet with her? And the answer to that is no. We have the ability to do video conferencing. All it takes is a phone call or email. We set that up, and Ms. Yateman's on the video call with them, going through their coursework. If the parents call and talk about, they're struggling with this aspect of the online curriculum, we're right there together. I can see her desk from my office. So we take about 5 steps, and we're in a meeting, and we're adjusting accommodations as necessary.
So really, it sounds like Ms. Chapin is going to be what we call the teacher of record.
Uh-huh.
So each student has kind of a case manager that provides support and helps the team really determine what's necessary. The beauty of, in my opinion, special education is we get to partner in a really close relationship with parents and families of students. So we're making decisions together to help accommodate whatever needs there might be. So I love the fact that we recognize the need for providing a service delivery model, even in the virtual academy, where we can literally meet the needs of every one of those individual students. So it's certainly an option that's very viable, I think, for our students. And I'm noticing a question. I know there's a banner going across the bottom of the screen with a link to a form. So if you had a question, but one of them says, there's a couple of them. Goodness, let's just do this. Can the virtual academy do accommodations for my special education student? What are some examples of those? So I don't know which one of you wants to take it. Maybe Carrie.
Well, I can start, and then you can talk about the accommodations that we give. And so anytime a student that is on an IEP is interested in going to the virtual academy, Mr. Roeder always gives me a call. I access that student's IEP, and we really start to look at their present levels. And so we want to look at what is their reading level? What is their math level? Are they in a general ed math class right now and just have accommodations, or are they actually in a direct instruction math class with a special ed teacher? And that's what really begins to drive what the program is going to look like for them virtually.
Have we done this before, Carrie? Like
we
last
have,
year? Okay.
yes.
So we have experience.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes, and we've actually been doing it the last couple of years, and then last year we were really fortunate because Mr. Roeder is just, I don't know, you have some foresight that I'm not sure how that works, but it's amazing because Mr. Roeder already had us working with Exact Path. Or was that you, Mr. Beard? I don't know. Mr. Roeder, which is a program that now the State Department is actually offering to all districts. And so I feel like we have a leg up there because Mr. Roeder already knows and understands the ins and outs of that program. And it's a diagnostic tool, and I'm gonna turn it over and let you talk a little bit about what that would look like. So if I told you a student was a direct instruction math student and they were in a special ed math class, what would that look like transitioning to you?
But what is a diagnostic tool? There's a lot of people that go, what? I don't know what that is.
So
It's like a wrench.
with Exact Path, it all starts with the diagnostic, which is a test where the student answers 25 to 45 questions. It's not timed, so it's going to give us a good measure of what they actually know. I call it the magic. It's that magic pill that we haven't had access to, that we had access to last year. And when we implemented it with kids, we saw magic things happen. But that diagnostic is going to go all the way back to kindergarten. It's going to identify every math skill, reading skill, language arts skill that they have ever missed as they do those diagnostics in those areas. And once we have that, it gives us the data we need so we can identify exactly what they're ready to learn. And then from there, we begin building courses. For math, that may be, are we ready to put them in our Edmentum courseware? Are they able to do Edgenuity? Do we need to stay in Exact Path and do assignments based on a daily assignment that from there? Do we need to provide completed guided notes so that they can just watch videos and follow along as they go? You know, what do the quizzes need to look like? What do the tests need to look like? And it all goes back to that Exact Path diagnostic, and then we build.
Okay, so I have a question, and I think this is really important for people to hear because it is a little bit scary for me to think about a student being detached a little bit, what would feel like a detachment from a teacher that I see every day, and that's just me. So here's my question. We have really put some thought over the years of making sure we have our hands in the middle of the progress of students in real time. So what would happen, for instance, if you saw a child who we have placed in a program, even with some modifications, because I know we modify some of the coursework that we have access to, but they're just not quite meeting the standard that we think that they should be. Number one, how fast do you detect that? And number two, what do you do in that instance?
So worst case scenario, it takes about 5 days at most. That's worst case. And when we're talking about special education students, we're talking about reports going to those teachers every single day. So it should take about 24 to 48 hours at most. And they're going to be in contact with the parents. Our parents always get progress reports every morning about 7:30 a.m. From our Edgenuity and Edmentum coursewares. They're able to pick those up straight out of their email for Edgenuity. They log into a program for Edmentum. For our elementary program, they log into their parent login, and they can see at any time exactly what those students are doing.
So not only are you triggering a teacher to make sure the students stay on track, a parent also gets that data in the morning every day so that if there's a problem, I also have a trigger to contact you and get help. So I think that lends itself to the Learning Lab, which is another one of my favorites. So if we see a trigger where we think that a student's not doing the things that they need to do, or maybe doesn't understand a particular concept, then the strategy for getting help, which I think is beautiful, again, something we've built for the last few years. How does that work, Mr. Roeder?
So basically what I would equate our Learning Lab to is if a student is sitting in the classroom and they need help, they raise their hand. If a student is sitting in a virtual class and they need help, they type an email or they pick up a phone. That's all it takes. And within about 5 minutes, we've got somebody sending them an email to start a Google Meet and teach them what they're missing and give them the help they need.
Because this year, even again, pre-COVID, we were visualizing how that could work off campus at an off-campus site in its own little place so that we could capture the gamut of pre-K really through grade 12 with some pretty immediate responses from our team to make sure kids are progressing, which I love that. I think it's a great model and something that will help us keep our students on track, and also something that maybe make our folks who might choose Virtual Academy to feel confident and comfortable. I tell you, I know we've done some questions about the difference in distance learning in March through May to what this really looks like now, Mr. Roeder. I recollect that phone conversation when you said, wait a second, our virtual kids that we've had forever are going to continue to be on pace even March through May. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, our kids, our virtual academy students, when March hit and we had to hold this, basically this kids went to that distance learning format. All we did in virtual was I sent an email to all my students and their parents and said, you need to continue working. All of your assignments are there. I'm still here. I'm just working from my house. Everything was there. Nothing changed other than the location I was working from. But for the kids, they logged into the system the same. The assignments were the same. The exams were the same. Everything was there. It was all available to them. With our elementary students, we needed to be able to provide the instruction through video. So we switched their program over to ExactPath because it had a more complete video library in addition to their assignments. But for our 6 through 12 kids, there was absolutely zero change when we went to that distance learning format.
Perfect. So there's a couple of things that I think we need to ask in the chat box, Carrie. And let's start with the one that seems maybe the easiest. I don't know if it's the easiest one. Maybe to me it's the easiest. Do we have to have a team meeting if we switch to virtual school to virtual? In other words, school closes, I think is what they're saying.
Sure.
And another meeting if we switch back again because it opens back up. And again, we're talking about that kind of flip on a dime.
Sure.
What we're talking about in terms of changing
Yes.
quickly. And is it the same for 504s?
So let me clarify a little bit. If the entire district goes back to distance learning,
Right.
then you would not have to have an IEP team meeting because students on IEPs and students who are not on IEPs are getting the same service delivery, which is
Gotcha.
distance learning.
Makes sense.
If a student is choosing, if a family is choosing to enroll in our virtual academy, we are absolutely going to have an IEP team meeting because we want to make sure that we're all on the same page about expectations, about accommodations, and we may have to tweak some things about service delivery because it may say that they're in, 240 minutes of special education a day, and it may not actually look that way when they're moving to the virtual platform.
Makes sense.
And one of the other questions that was on there that I want to address in this same conversation was about OTPT and speech.
Okay.
If a student decides and a family decides that their student is going to move to the virtual academy and they already receive OTPT or speech services, those services are still going to stay in place.
Right.
And I actually talked to Ms. Durkee this week. I hadn't gotten a chance to tell Mr. Roeder yet. I did this afternoon. I said, oh, by the way, I haven't told you this yet, but we're looking for a space within that same building where the virtual academy is being housed, where if a parent was going to come in and actually get some FaceTime one-on-one, in-person work with the virtual lab teacher, that they could also get their related services, their OT, PT, speech. I will call that the therapy lab. How we can call it that.
Yeah.
And so that way, if you have a service, a related service like OT, PT, or speech that your student really needs, we are not going to deny that service simply because you've moved to virtual. They're going to continue to get those services.
But you wouldn't come to my home.
No, so that's going to be a shift to something different. And so that actually is one other question. Sean, if you'll flip the one about kids, yes, there we go. So I do want to make this clarification, and I know we need to wrap up.
Read the question.
Yes.
You have about 2 minutes, but it says,
Yeah.
what about kids that don't switch classes and stay in one class all day long, do their IEP accommodations? What would virtual look like for them? And here's the thing, we do have home-based services that we do have developed over time. So Carrie,
Right.
take it away.
And so this is where where Mr. Roeder and I will actually work really closely together to make sure that we are meeting the needs of that child in the best possible way. So if a student is in a self-contained classroom and we have a self-contained program in a couple of our different elementary sites. We have one program in our middle school and one program at our high school. If you have a student who spends their entire day in a special education classroom with a teacher and para support, talking more about like the functional skills that we were talking about earlier, we're really going to come to the table and have a conversation about, are we talking virtual or are we talking home-based? And the beauty of home-based with what we've learned through distance learning, If I am in Miss Weldon's class at Angus and I decide that I want to move to virtual or home-based services, well, then we can make that look exactly how we want it to look. So I can have a Google Meet when the class is having their circle time, and
Sure.
my student is still participating in circle time, but they're doing it from home.
So you have actually provided home-based services. I remember in your time that you
Yes.
spent at Angus Valley Elementary
Yes.
several years ago, so that you have actually been the service provider for home-based instruction.
Right, right. And the way that that looks may look a little bit different with the pandemic, but I do know we are gonna meet those needs how we have to. So if therapy needs to be done through teletherapy, then that's what we're gonna do. If we have a therapy provider, for example, our physical therapy assistant, Dawn Youngblood, she has done tons of home health, and so she's very comfortable with the protocol that would take place if she did need to go into a home.
Sure.
And so those are conversations we're gonna have one-on-one with families to make sure that we're meeting those needs.
Absolutely, we do have some good people, Carrie. So we're about out of time. I want to do one little teaser.
I
before-
have one thing I have to address,
Okay, do it
really quick.
really quick.
So if anybody's out there that needs a transfer from another district and you have a special education child, please apply. That goes through our special education director, Ms. Slayhuber, and she reviews that. That is not based on whether your child's on an IEP or not. It is truly based on what the caseload for our special education teachers look like within our district, because we have to service them, but we want to make sure that we can meet your needs and service you too. So just know that just because your child's special ed doesn't mean that you can't apply.
Good
for a
point.
transfer.
Thank you, Ms. Arnold. So just a little teaser for next week. We have gotten some questions about extracurricular activities, and I thought it might be kind of fun to invite our athletic director, Mr. Rod Sitton, and our assistant director, Coach Bobby Klink, to come in and talk about really kind of how that's going. I think it would be really good and fun to get a report about some of the things that have happened this summer, as well as maybe some challenges too that they've had this summer as well. To be totally honest, I think in this whole entire pandemic world, what we've learned is that there are challenges, and we have to step up to the plate. No pun intended for the athletic department, but truly step up to the plate and try to figure that out. So thanks for joining us tonight. Hope to see you back next week at 7. And again, we're open for phone calls if you have questions about anything in the district. The main number is 246-1400. Give us a call and we can certainly direct you in the right direction.
So next time, bring a friend.
Really, bring a friend, get some popcorn. Okay, thank you all for showing up tonight.